Hello folks, I hope that you're having just a great and safe day today and keeping yourself safe in our current COVID crisis. Today I want to take a look at Guy de Maupassant. He was a famous French writer in the late 1800s. He wrote for decades, wrote hundreds and hundreds of short stories during that time. I've looked at him before. This is the third story now in this collection. I'll link you to it at the end. In case you're interested in picking it up. I'll also try to find you a free translation online since he wrote such a long time ago in French. I tried to find you free translations online that are no longer legal. They're past their sell-by date for their IP, so you can link to them online without having to worry about copyright violations and so forth. I'll try to do that for you in this case too for Apparition. The Apparition is Guy de Maupassant's really his sole attempt to write a ghost story. He wrote a lot of horror stories, but most of his horror stories tend to be in one of two camps. The first camp are weird horror stories like the Horla. Or On the River, which was the second review I did for you. This is the third. They tend to be in that sort of a genre. The second style of genres are, and there are more of these of them, are sort of the Poe-esque ones. And we're actually going to be looking at one of those later on. We're going to be taking a look at Who Knows, which is probably my third favorite of the ones that I read from him, and that one is more Poe-esque in its way and its style. And many of the stories that I read in the story, at least half of them, had more of the Poe feel. And I'd say the next biggest number, well, actually, it's probably more like 2/3, a third, and then this one story is the sole ghost story. I did a little bit of research on the Apparition. It does seem like it's the sole ghost story by Guy de Maupassant. So if you're interested in reading this classic writer on this sort of traditional classic horror subgenre and see what his take was of it, the Apparition will be your chance to get a good feel for it. The Apparition is a very good, solid ghost story. It does a lot of good things. Guy has a lot of sensitivity for his characters, particularly the female character, which is unusual since he was such a big, giant misogynist. He wasn't just the typical misogynist of the era. He's a lot more misogynist than normal. It's hard to find his story. That's why a lot of times you'll find the best of Guy de Maupassant story collections rather than ones that have like a lot more of his things, and because they're just, a lot of them are hard to read for modern readers. They're so anti-woman, and so they're not just the typical eras sort of, it's not like reading H. Rider Haggard in his 1870 She, which is sexist, but still has an empowering woman in it who defies the archetypes. Compare her to comparing him to a contemporary like H. Rider Haggard or something like that. It's very different. But in here, one of the things I like is how sensitive he is to the female character and to the main character. In a previous story that I reviewed for you, the main character, who's clearly speaking for Guy de Maupassant, says that he believes that 90% of marriages wind up with the husband being cuckolded without him realizing it, because that's how often that women cheat on men. He just does not see women as anything other than as cynical, mean, and sinister people. But in this story, he treats the female character with some respect, which I like, and I think that's actually pretty good. And I think the story is a better story for it because there is that sensitivity to both of the characters that's happening in the story. The story is going to open up with an older character who admits he's in his 80s now, and he's going to tell a story that happened decades and decades ago when he was in his 20s. And he mentions that now that he's in his mid-80s, he's kind of gotten to the point where he can admit some of these things without it being seen like he's a bad person or a weak person. He's going to talk about the fact that he is afraid of the dark and nighttime ever since this event happened to him, things like that. And he knows that if he admitted that when he was in his 20s, people would have thought he was, weak or insane or something like that, right? They would have tried to fix him. But now that he's in his mid-80s, they're much less likely to hold that against him. I guess it's probably true. People in their mid-80s are probably much more likely to be seen as, okay, you're allowed to be afraid of the dark, you're allowed to be afraid of, nighttime, those sorts of things, isolation, sure, those sorts of things. He starts out his story, and I'll give you just a quick synopsis. And he starts out his story by telling us that he was assigned a task by an older gentleman who had left his home but was unable to go back for various reasons, and really wanted to have this guy go and do a task for him. And so he gave this our point of view character a letter to introduce himself to the butler actually to the gardener, and then the gardener would let him in and to do the things that were in the letter and so forth. And he was going to bring back a few things from this person, from a desk in a room in this estate that this guy hadn't been into for a while. So that's what our main character is going to go do. He's going to go do that. And of course, as you can tell, I told you it was a ghost story. That's his genre. He'll encounter a ghost. And so forth. And again, there's the ghost has a very interesting description. It's well written by Guy de Maupassant. It has a very solid, strong characterization and so forth. And again, it's a very compassionate one, a very sensitive one by the writer. And by the people who are telling the story as well. And you can certainly understand why the person was afraid of the night afterwards. So that's kind of the apparition in a shorthand for you. It's less than 10 pages long. It took me 15 minutes to read it yesterday. I read it yesterday for the first time as a part of this this weird and horror tale collection by Guy de Maupassant. But that's that for you. Again, I'll go ahead and try to link you to the collection below in case you're interested in picking it up and reading it in paper form like I have to read everything. But again, I'll also find you a free link if you just want to check it out. So that's the apparition for y'all. Let me know what you thought about it. Have you read it? I'd be happy to engage with it more in the comments below. I do think it's a strong ghost story. It stands on its own. So I wanted to bring it to you now as sort of this solo opportunity to read a Guy de Maupassant in a traditional English style ghost story. It seems much more like, Singleman by, famous writers, Charles Dickens, or something like that, than it does traditional Guy stuff. So I think there's a lot of fun stuff to be had in it. And again, I'll leave you to it. Let me know what you thought about it in the comments below. Thank you for watching this video. I know that we all have so many busy things happening in our lives. The fact you spent this time with me is humbling. And finally, if you enjoyed this review, please feel encouraged to hit that subscribe button. There's going to be so many more of these videos to follow. And I really do appreciate your time again, and have a good one.